He thought he was buying silence, 22 acres of abandoned airfield to forget his past. But buried under the farthest hangar, Elias Baldwin found a sealed steel door with his name on it, and turning the handle woke up more than just history. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me, and please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Elias Baldwin was 73 years old when he made the worst investment of his life, or perhaps the best. He could not decide yet. The abandoned airfield sat 30 miles outside the nearest town, a forgotten relic from decades past when planes still landed on these cracked runways. The real estate agent called it a development opportunity. Elias called it exactly what he needed, a place where no one would ask questions, a place where the silence was so thick you could choke on it. He moved into the old control tower on a Tuesday. The structure groaned under his weight as he climbed the stairs, rust flaking off the railings like dead skin. Everything smelled of decay and motor oil. Perfect. Elias did not want comfort. He wanted distance from the life he had abandoned 3 months earlier. Distance from the bankruptcy. Distance from the son who no longer returned his calls. Distance from the wife who had left him 2 years before that. Distance from the business partners who had stolen everything he built. Distance from the mirror that showed him a man who had failed at everything that mattered. The first week passed in a blur of manual labor. Elias cleared debris from the main hangar, his back screaming with each shovelful of rubble. He found old engine parts, shredded tarps, and the skeleton of what might have been a small aircraft once. The work felt good, mindless, exhausting enough that sleep came without the usual parade of regrets. He ate canned food heated on a camping stove. He washed himself with cold water from a well that still functioned. He spoke to no one. The isolation was not lonely. It was necessary, like draining poison from a wound, but it was the farthest hangar that bothered him. Hangar 7. The agent had not mentioned it, and when Elias asked, the man's face had gone carefully blank. Structurally unsound, he had said. Best to leave it alone. Condemned by inspectors decades ago, too dangerous to enter, which was exactly why Elias found himself walking toward it on the 8th day, crowbar in hand. Because in 73 years of living, he had learned that the things people told you to avoid were usually the things worth finding. The hangar doors had been welded shut from the outside, not rusted, not locked, welded. Elias stared at the crude metalwork, his pulse quickening. For the first time in months, someone had wanted this building sealed, wanted it sealed badly enough to make it permanent. He wedged the crowbar into a gap and pulled until his shoulders burned. The weld cracked, then broke. The door shrieked open 6 inches, then a foot, then wide enough for him to slip through. Inside, the darkness was absolute. Elias pulled out his flashlight, and the beam cut through dust so thick it looked like fog. The hangar was empty except for a concrete floor and support beams that stretched into shadow. Empty, that is, except for the corner. The far corner where the concrete looked different, newer, poured in a different decade than the rest. Elias walked toward it, his footsteps echoing wrong, too hollow, like walking over a drum. And then he saw it. A steel hatch set flush with the floor, 3 feet wide, secured with bolts that gleamed like they had been installed yesterday, and stamped into the metal in crude letters, E. Baldwin, his name, his exact name, not just Baldwin. E. Baldwin, Elias Baldwin. Elias stood there for 5 full minutes, staring, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were showing him. This airfield had been abandoned for 40 years. He had been born 73 years ago, hundreds of miles from here, in a city he had not thought about in decades. There was no reason, no logical reason, for his name to be on anything in this place. He had never been here before. had never heard of this airfield until the agent showed him the listing 3 weeks ago. Yet here was his name, stamped into steel, waiting. He knelt down. His knees cracked. His hands shook as he touched the cold metal. The bolts were sealed with some kind of resin, industrial grade, the kind used to preserve things for lifetimes. It took him 3 hours to chip it away with the crowbar. 3 hours while the sun set outside and the hangar filled with shadows that felt like they were watching. When the last bolt came free, Elias grabbed the handle and pulled. The hatch opened with a hiss of escaping air, cold and stale, like opening a tomb that had been sealed since before he was born. A ladder led down into blackness. Elias should have left, should have sealed it back up and walked away, should have driven into town and asked questions. But questions required talking to people, and people required explanations, and Elias was done explaining himself to anyone. So instead, he climbed down. 20 rungs, 30. His arms ached. At 40, his feet hit solid ground. The flashlight revealed a corridor carved from raw earth and reinforced with steel beams. The walls were lined with cables, thick as his wrist, snaking along the ceiling and disappearing into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered to life as he moved forward, dim red bulbs that barely pushed back the dark. Motion sensors, still working after all these years. The corridor ended at a door, a real door, steel, sealed with a rubber gasket that was still intact, and next to it, a panel with a handprint scanner covered in decades of dust. Elias wiped it clean with his sleeve and pressed his palm against the glass. Nothing. Of course nothing. This was insane. He was standing in an underground bunker beneath an abandoned airfield, with his name on the entrance, and he was expecting a handprint scanner from 40 years ago to recognize him. Madness. But then the panel beeped. Once. Twice. Green light flooded the corridor, bright enough to make him squint. The door unlocked with a mechanical clunk that echoed like a gunshot. He pushed it open, and the room beyond stole his breath. The space was massive, 30 feet high, maybe more, carved out of the earth like a cathedral built by engineers instead of believers. And in the center, suspended by cables and hydraulic arms thick as tree trunks, was something that made Elias forget how to breathe. An aircraft. But not like any aircraft he had ever seen. The hull was seamless, no rivets, no panels, no visible joints, just smooth black material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The shape was wrong. Too angular at the nose, too organic at the wings, wings that curved like blades or like the fins of some deep sea creature. A cockpit that looked more like an eye, a single dark oval set into the front, and covering every surface, etched into the black material itself, were symbols, diagrams, equations that hurt to look at because they made sense in a way his mind could not process. Elias walked around it in a daze, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Workstations lined the walls, covered in papers yellowed with age, blueprints, schematics, photographs pinned to corkboards that crumbled at the edges. He picked up the nearest photo and his heart stopped. The man in the picture was tall, lean, with wild grey hair that stuck up in every direction, and eyes that burned with the intensity of someone who had seen too much and understood too little. Elias knew that face. He had seen it in old family albums his mother kept hidden in the attic. His grandfather, Samuel Baldwin, dead 30 years before Elias was born, dead in a car accident that no one in the family ever wanted to talk about. The subject changed whenever anyone asked. The albums were put away. The name became a whisper, and then a silence. But here he was, standing in front of this impossible machine, smiling like he had unlocked the secrets of the universe and found them more beautiful than terrifying. Behind him in the photograph were other men, engineers, scientists, all wearing expressions that mixed excitement with fear, and in the background, barely visible, was the craft, smaller, incomplete, but unmistakably the same machine that now hung above Elias like a sleeping god. A voice spoke from behind him. "Do not touch anything." Elias spun, dropping the photograph. It fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. An old man stood in the doorway, older even than Elias, bent and weathered like driftwood left too long in the sun. He leaned heavily on a cane, his shoulders hunched, but his eyes were sharp, too sharp, the kind of sharp that came from decades of watching and waiting. "How did you get down here?" Elias managed to say. His voice sounded thin in the vast space. The old man smiled without humor. "I have been waiting for you. My name is Silas. I worked with your grandfather. I've been maintaining this place for 52 years, waiting for a Baldwin to finally come home." Elias's mouth opened and closed. Words failed him. 52 years? That is not possible. Silas limped forward, his cane tapping on the concrete. Each step was careful, measured, like a man who had learned to conserve energy. Possible or not, here I am. Here you are. Here it is. He gestured at the craft with his cane. Your grandfather built that, not alone. He had help, funding, government contracts. Back when the government still believed in dreamers, back when they thought pushing boundaries was worth the risk. But Samuel pushed too far, too fast. He did not just want to build a better plane. He wanted to build something that could go places planes were never meant to go. "What does that mean?" Elias whispered. Silas stopped a few feet away, studying him like a specimen under glass. "It means your grandfather was a genius, a dangerous genius. He believed that the universe was not what we thought, not a collection of separate moments strung together like beads on a string. He believed time was a sphere, that every moment, every choice, every possibility existed simultaneously, layered on top of each other like pages in a book. And he believed that with the right technology, the right craft, you could move between those pages, not forward or backward, sideways, into the lives you did not live, into the choices you did not make." Elias felt cold spreading through his chest. "That is impossible." Silas laughed, a dry sound like leaves crumbling. "So is a handprint scanner recognizing someone who was not born when it was installed. So is a door with your name on it in a place you have never been. Yet here we are. Your grandfather did not die in a car accident. He died testing that." Silas pointed at the craft again. "He took it up on a test flight in 1971. It worked. It worked too well. He vanished for 6 hours. When the craft came back, Samuel was inside, but he was not the same. He kept talking about things he had seen, lives he had lived, versions of himself that made different choices. He kept saying he understood now, understood everything, but understanding broke him. 3 days later, he was dead. Heart attack, they said. But I was there. I saw his face. He did not die from his heart failing. He died from knowing too much." Elias backed away from the craft, his legs weak. "And the government?" Silas's expression darkened. They panicked, shut down the project, sealed this place, buried the research, killed anyone who tried to talk. I only survived because I agreed to stay, to maintain the craft, to keep it ready, just in case. They gave me supplies, money, enough to live on, and they left me here, alone, for 52 years, a prisoner in a tomb. But your grandfather, he was smarter than they knew. Before he died, he encoded the access systems, tied them to his bloodline, to his genes. Only a Baldwin could open that door. Only a Baldwin could activate the craft. He knew that one day someone from his family would find this place, would need this place, and he made sure they could get in. Why? The word came out as a gasp. Why would he do that? Because Samuel believed. It was too important to destroy. Silas stepped closer, his voice dropping. He believed that humanity needed to know the truth, that we are not locked into one life, one path, one set of choices, that every moment is a branch, and we can see the other branches if we are brave enough to look. He wanted his descendants to have that choice, to see what he saw, to understand what he understood, even if it broke them the way it broke him. Elias shook his head. I am not interested. I came here to disappear, not to chase my grandfather's madness. Silas's expression hardened. They know you are here. The moment you opened that hatch, you triggered alarms that have been dormant for decades, alarms I could not disable. I tried. For 52 years I tried. But your grandfather built them into the system itself, tied them to the door, so the government knows. And they are coming. Tonight, tomorrow, but they will come, and they will bury you the same way they buried your grandfather, unless you do what he could not. Unless you fly. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Fly. Elias looked at the craft, this impossible machine that should not exist, and felt something stir in his chest. Not fear. Not anymore. Curiosity. Hunger. The same hunger that had driven him to open the welded door. The same hunger that had pushed him down the ladder into darkness. Maybe it was the Baldwin blood. Maybe it was just the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose. What does it do? He whispered. What happens if I get inside? Silas smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. It shows you the truth. Every truth. The ones you have lived, and the ones you have not. Your grandfather believed that consciousness is not bound by time, that every version of you across every choice you ever made exists somewhere, layered like echoes. Icarus, that is what he called it, does not fly through space. It flies through existence itself, through the layers, and once you are inside, once you activate it, there is no going back. You will see everything, remember everything, become everything you could have been. And when you return, if you return, you will carry all of it. Every life, every choice, every moment. Your grandfather said it was like becoming infinite. But infinity has weight. It crushes some people. It freed him for a moment, before it killed him. Footsteps echoed from the corridor above, distant, hurried. Multiple people moving fast. Silas stiffened, his knuckles white on the cane. They are here, faster than I thought. They must have had people stationed nearby, waiting. Elias, you have seconds. Get in the craft or die in this hole with me. Your choice. But choose now. Elias did not think. Thinking was what had ruined his life. Thinking led to hesitation. Hesitation led to failure. Failure led to standing in a control tower at 73, alone and broken. He ran to the craft. His legs screamed. His lungs burned. He found a seam in the hull that split open at his touch, the black material peeling back like skin. The cockpit interior glowed with soft blue light. Panels appearing in the air before him, holographic and responsive. The seat molded to his body like it had been waiting for him specifically, like it knew his shape before he arrived. Controls appeared. Not buttons, not switches, symbols. The same symbols etched on the outside. His hands moved toward them without conscious thought. Silas's voice shouted from outside. Press the center panel, the circle. Do it now. Elias slammed his palm against the glowing circle in the center of the console. The craft hummed, then roared. Energy flooded through the cables suspending it, sparks cascading from the workstations, papers igniting, the bulbs overhead exploding in sequence, the hydraulic arms released with metallic shrieks, and then the world exploded into light. Not light, lightning, pure white fire that consumed everything, the hangar, the earth, the concrete, reality itself. Elias screamed but made no sound. His body was gone. His mind was everywhere. He saw his childhood, every moment, every scraped knee and lost tooth and birthday cake. But not just what happened, what could have happened. He saw himself taking his father's hand instead of pulling away that day at the lake. Saw a version where they talked instead of fought. Saw a life where his father did not die angry and distant. He saw himself in college but different, making different friends, choosing a different major, becoming a teacher instead of a businessman. Saw classrooms full of faces that looked at him with respect instead of fear. Saw students who remembered him decades later instead of employees who celebrated when he left. He saw his wife, not the woman who left him, another woman, met at a different time in a different way. Saw children he never had, 2 daughters with her smile and his stubbornness. Saw grandchildren who called him by name and climbed into his lap. Saw holidays that did not end in silence. Saw a son, his actual son, the one who stopped calling, but in this version they were close. In this version, Elias had been there, had listened, had chosen family over contracts and board meetings and the endless chase for more. He saw himself at 50, at 60, at 70, surrounded by people who loved him instead of standing alone, in an empty control tower counting his failures. But he also saw the other paths, the darker ones, saw himself making worse choices, becoming meaner, more desperate, saw bankruptcy coming earlier, saw prison, saw addiction, saw a version where he did not buy the airfield, but instead disappeared into the mountains and was never found, saw every possible Elias Baldwin spreading out like branches on a tree, infinite and overwhelming. And threading through all of it, like a river through a forest, was his grandfather, Samuel, young and alive, working through the night on equations that bridged worlds. Saw government agents arriving at the hangar with guns and orders. Saw Silas, decades younger, trying to stop them. Saw Samuel's face when he realized they were going to kill him. Saw him taking the craft up one last time, not to escape, but to prove it worked. Saw him vanishing into light just like Elias was vanishing now. Saw him return, changed, eyes wide with knowledge that human minds were not meant to hold. Saw him clutching his chest 3 days later, gasping, dying not from heart failure, but from the weight of infinity crushing his soul. Saw Silas dragging Samuel's body into the hangar and sealing it in a coffin hidden beneath the floor. Saw him spending 52 years alone, aging, waiting, maintaining the craft with trembling hands because he had made a promise. Saw the government building over the airfield, burying it like a secret, like a sin. Saw the decades passing above while below. In the dark, Icarus waited. Saw the real estate listing appear online. Saw Elias, broken and desperate, clicking the link. Saw himself driving out here. Saw the loop closing, because it was never random, never chance. The craft had been waiting. The door had been waiting. His name had been waiting, because some legacies are not inherited. They are inevitable. They reach backward through time and pull you toward them like gravity. And Elias had been falling toward this moment since the day he was born. The light contracted, the visions collapsed, the craft solidified. Icarus hung in the air inside the hangar, no longer suspended by cables but floating, impossibly, on nothing. The cockpit was silent. Elias opened his eyes. His hands were steady, his mind was clear, but it was also full, fuller than it had ever been. He could remember lives he had not lived, could feel the weight of choices he had not made, could see the faces of children who did not exist and feel love for them anyway. It should have broken him, should have crushed him the way it crushed Samuel, but instead it felt like waking up, like he had been asleep his entire life, and only now, at 73, had he finally opened his eyes. The craft descended slowly, settling on the concrete with a whisper of displaced air. The cockpit opened. Elias stepped out. His legs were steady. Silas stood at the edge of the room, leaning on his cane, smiling through tears that carved lines down his weathered face. "You came back," he whispered. Samuel did not think anyone would. He thought the weight would be too much. "But you came back." Elias looked at his hands. They did not shake. "I saw him. I saw everything." Silas nodded. "That is the gift and the curse. You are not one person anymore. You are every person you could have been. Every choice layered on top of each other. How does it feel?" Elias thought about the question, considered it, felt the answer in his bones. "It feels like understanding, like I spent 73 years angry at the world for not giving me what I deserved. But I see now. I see all the ways I could have chosen differently, all the moments I threw away. And I see the moments I got right too, the few of them. It does not erase the pain, but it explains it. And somehow that is enough." Footsteps pounded down the corridor, shouting. Orders barked in clipped military tones. Agents burst through the door, 6 of them, weapons raised, flashlights cutting through the dimness. They stopped when they saw the craft. Stopped when they saw Elias standing beside it. Calm, unchanged, but fundamentally different in ways they could sense but not name. One of them, a woman with steel-grey hair and a face like carved stone, lowered her weapon first. She spoke into a radio clipped to her shoulder. "Icarus is active. Subject has integrated. Stand down. Repeat. Stand down." The other agents hesitated, then lowered their weapons one by one. The woman stepped forward, studying Elias like a puzzle she needed to solve. "Your grandfather said one day someone would make it back." "We did not. Believe him. 52 years we have kept this place sealed. 52 years we have monitored for the genetic trigger. When it activated, we thought it was a malfunction. But here you are, alive, sane." "How?" Elias met her gaze. "Maybe I had less to lose than he did, or maybe I needed the truth more. I do not know. But I know this. What my grandfather built, what I just experienced, it is real, and you cannot bury it forever." The woman's jaw tightened. "We have kept it buried this long." Elias shook his head. "No, you kept it waiting. There is a difference. My grandfather encoded it to his bloodline because he knew you would try to destroy it. He knew that fear would make you seal it away, but he also knew that eventually someone would come who needed it enough to unlock it. And that person would have a choice. Seal it again, or share it." The woman's hand moved toward her weapon. "If you think we will let you walk out of here and tell the world, you are mistaken." Silas stepped forward, his cane tapping. "You will let him walk out, because I have spent 52 years rigging this place with enough explosives to turn this entire airfield into a crater. You kill him, I detonate. You try to seal it again, I detonate. The only reason I have not blown it all to hell already is because I made a promise to Samuel, a promise that his work would not die with him. Elias just fulfilled that promise. Now it is your turn to choose. Let him go, or we all go together." The woman stared at Silas, then at Elias, then at the craft. Her radio crackled. A voice on the other end said something inaudible. She replied quietly, "Understood." Then she looked back at Elias. "What do you want?" Elias thought about the question, thought about the lives he had seen, the choices, the infinite branches. I want to live the rest of my years without running, without hiding. I want to see my son again and tell him I understand now why I failed him. I want to take the knowledge I have and maybe, just maybe, do something good with it. I am not asking to announce this to the world. I know they would never believe me anyway, but I am also not pretending it does not exist. This craft, this knowledge, it belongs to humanity, not to you, not to me. But it is not time yet. Maybe it will never be time. But that decision should not be made by people with guns. It should be made by someone who has flown, who has seen, who understands the weight. The woman was silent for a long moment. Then she holstered her weapon. You get one chance. You talk about this, even hint at it, and we will come for you. Understand? Elias nodded. I understand. But know this. I am not afraid of you anymore. I have seen every way I could die, every version of my end. Some are peaceful, some are not. But they all end the same, with me knowing I finally did something. That mattered. So threaten me if you want, but it will not change anything. The woman turned and walked toward the door. Her team followed. At the threshold she paused. Your grandfather was right. About the weight. Be careful it does not crush you. Then they were gone. Footsteps receding up the corridor, engines starting above, the sound fading into the distance. Silas let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 52 years. You did it. You actually did it. Elias walked over to him and placed a hand on the old man's shoulder. Thank you for waiting, for keeping the promise. Silas's eyes were wet. It was not just for Samuel, it was for me too. I needed to see it work, needed to see someone come back, otherwise the last 52 years were for nothing. But now I know. It was worth it. All of it. Elias looked around the chamber, at the craft, at the workstations, at the photographs of his grandfather, young and burning with purpose. What happens now? Silas smiled. Now you decide. Icarus is yours, your legacy, your burden. You can seal it again, walk away, pretend this never happened, or you can do what your grandfather wanted. Keep it ready, keep it waiting, for the next person who needs it, because there will be another. There is always another. Someone broken enough, desperate enough, brave enough to open the door. Elias thought about the people he had seen in the visions. The versions of himself who had made different choices, better choices. He thought about his son, his wife, the life he had wasted chasing things that did not matter, and he thought about the gift his grandfather had given him. Not the craft, not the technology, but the understanding, the knowledge that it was never too late, that every moment was a new choice, that the past was not a chain but a map. I will keep it ready, but I will also try to live better, to be better, for whatever time I have left. Silas nodded. That is all anyone can do. They climbed out of the bunker together, two old men ascending a ladder into the light. The sun was rising over the abandoned airfield. The runways stretched toward the horizon, cracked and overgrown, but somehow no longer forgotten. Elias stood at the entrance to Hangar 7 and watched the light spread across the land. 22 acres, his name on a door, a craft that bent reality, a grandfather's dream, a legacy that had been waiting 73 years for him to be broken enough, desperate enough, ready enough to claim it. He smiled. For the first time in months, Elias Baldwin smiled, because he finally understood. He had not bought this place to escape. He had bought it to arrive. And now that he was here, now that he had flown through every version of himself and returned, whole, there was no going back, only forward, into whatever came next. carrying the weight of knowledge that should not exist, living the legacy that could not die, protecting something most people would never understand, and maybe, just maybe, finding a way to be the man he saw in the visions, the better version, the one who chose love over pride, connection over isolation, purpose over profit. Silas stood beside him, leaning on his cane, breathing in the morning air like it was the first time in decades. I think I can rest now. My part is done. Elias turned to him. What will you do? Silas shrugged. I have a sister I have not seen in 50 years. Maybe it is time to go home, see if she still remembers me, see if I can remember what it is like to be human instead of a caretaker for ghosts. Elias nodded. Thank you for everything. Silas gripped his shoulder. Thank you for finishing it, for proving Samuel was right. Now go, live, and if someone else comes, if another Baldwin finds this place, you will know what to tell them. That the wait is real, but so is the freedom. They shook hands. Then Silas walked toward a truck parked near the control tower, old and battered but still running. He climbed in, started the engine, drove away down the long access road, dust rising behind him like a curtain closing on 52 years. Elias watched until the truck disappeared. Then he turned back to Hangar 7. The door stood open, the hatch below waiting. And somewhere, beneath the earth, Icarus rested, silent, patient, ready. Elias Baldwin was 73 years old. He had lost his business, his family, his pride. But standing there in the morning light, watching the sun paint the sky in colors he had never bothered to notice before, he felt richer than he had ever been. Because now he knew that every moment mattered, every choice shaped worlds, and he still had time. Not much, but enough. Enough to call his son, enough to apologize, enough to try, and if that failed, if his son refused to listen, then at least Elias would know he tried, would carry that choice forward into whatever came next, because he was not running anymore, was not hiding. He was living, finally, truly, living, with the weight of infinite lives behind him and one precious life ahead. And that, he thought, was exactly what his grandfather had wanted. Not for him to carry the burden alone, but to understand that the burden was also a gift, that seeing every path meant choosing your own with intention, with purpose, with love. And Elias chose, here, now, this life, this moment, this chance. He chose to stop failing and start trying, and maybe that was all anyone could ever do. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more videos like this.